List the reasons why you think this movie is bad in the comments below. I'll wait. So the question for today's Top 3 Tuesday episode is, what are your top 3 favorite video game movies? This topic was brought up by Canadian Blu-ray, who left that suggestion in the comments below. And of course, we encourage everyone watching to participate in the episode by leaving your comments in the comments below. What are future topics that you want us to tackle? Myself, Lester, or Ian, if you want to suggest any specific one of us to do it. Or what are your responses to today's question? These movies might not be necessarily the most critically acclaimed according to some of these Rotten Tomato scores, but I've never been known for my movie critiquing acumen. My kids are in the background. This is real life. Also, all the movies I'm going to be talking about, I'm really going off memory, except for the little bio I kind of give about each movie at the beginning when I first introduce it. The memories that I have are literally off memory. I haven't seen some of these movies for like a year or two. So maybe some of you will have better insight in these movies than I will, so feel free to share your insights in the comments below. Number 3 on my list. This movie came out in the sweet, sweet summer of 1995. A different era. Of course, I'm talking about the cinematic masterpiece that is Mortal Kombat, the movie. Of course, I know this is not a cinematic masterpiece, but you kind of have to think of the era that this movie came out in. In a time where there was a litany of these movies coming out, like Double Dragon, Super Mario Brothers, Street Fighter, that really strayed far away from the source material. AVGN actually did a review on this, and AVGN hit the nail on the head when he said that this movie really stayed close to the source material that was Mortal Kombat. Really, a game like Mortal Kombat, like back in the day, you ask kids, why do you like Mortal Kombat? It has blood. It looks realistic. Nothing like Lester, you know, it has a really in-depth story. It has a very complicated fighting game mechanic system. People liked it for the flash. People liked it. It was the video game equivalent of a big blockbuster movie, you know? Had a lot of pizzazz. Pizzazz. I don't regard the Mortal Kombat game as like a really in-depth fighting game. Even to this day, I might get some heat for saying that, but I'm gonna stick to that. Because it's not Street Fighter, right? So, the transition to make this video game into a movie really wasn't that hard. It had everything you wanted. It had ninjas in it. It had Sonya Blade. Had all the Oriental, like remember in wrestling in the early 90s? If anyone had like an Asian face. From the Orient.
A deadly weapon from the Orient that he's found.
This movie had a lot of those like Oriental inspirations that was really hot in the ninja craze of the 90s. I think this kind of came off of that, but the movie itself, Mortal Kombat, yes, it stuck very close to the source material. As a kid, it gave you everything that you were looking for in a Mortal Kombat movie. You had Scorpion, you had Sub-Zero, and in the movie, they didn't mess around. It was Scorpion, it was Sub-Zero, there was fighting. Even though it was a PG-13 movie, was this PG-13? I'm pretty sure it was not rated R, because I remember as a kid I watched it. 14A rating. In a game that was rated R, they had a fatality attempt in this movie. You know when Scorpion rips off his mask? Come on, man! They had a fatality with Sub-Zero and that no-name guy. You remember? Like he freezes him and then he shatters him? There's a fatality in a movie! Of course, the storyline is very basic, but this movie had Goro. Goro. I thought the casting in this movie was spot on. I bought every actor who portrayed a character, and I would be sad if I did not mention the soundtrack to this movie. Mortal Kombat! That was one of the first tapes I ever bought from HMV. I distinctly remember, I think it was Christmas. I went to HMV with my Christmas money. I bought a cassette tape of Monica, the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, and Skilo. Everything in this movie was great. You know, I wasn't going to the movie I was a young kid, so I wasn't expecting much anyways, but even as an adult, I can watch this movie today. Yes, some people may see it's corny, but those are probably people who grew up out of this era. You know, I grew up, this was my era of experiencing the world as a teen. Mortal Kombat was the shit, and I still watch it to this day. I actually have the DVD of it still, looking for the Blu-ray to replace it in that DVD collection. Man, this was a great movie. You have Scorpion's little, you know, get over here! Satisfying. This movie was satisfying. Great martial arts action in this movie. Beautiful scenes. Like the cinematography in this I thought was awesome. You know, I loved the action flicks of the 90s. And I think this fits right up there with the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, the Van Damme movies. You know, Mortal Kombat deserves its spot as number 3 on my list for favorite video game movies. Real life. I love my kids. Number 2 on my list. This movie was made after the millennium. Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
Not that Resident Evil. The movie Resident Evil, which has kind of just gone to shit. But it had promising beginnings, I will say. The first Resident Evil movie came out in 2002, starring the beautiful Mila Jovovich. I remember buying this DVD. It's one of the first DVDs that I bought when I started DVD collecting in the early 2000s. Now, I know a lot of Resident Evil purists look down on this movie. I like to think of this movie as kind of like an alternate universe of Resident Evil. I understand why they made the movie like this. I think a slow trudge through a mansion would really bore the moviegoers at the time. Like, this is probably a summer blockbuster, but I understand why they made this movie like this. They went right from the mansion, they show it for like half a second, which the video game, the original Resident Evil video game, you're in the mansion for the whole time and you only spend maybe 25 minutes in the lab, where here in the Resident Evil movie you spend maybe 10 minutes in the mansion and an hour and a half in the secret lab. They introduce a new character too, Alice, who I don't... Again, Hollywood putting their noses in our video game business. How dare you? Actually, I thought it turned out pretty good, having the Alice character in this movie. But again, this is another one of those movies, if you did not grow up in that era, you may not understand it as much as somebody like me who grew up in this era. This movie came out at a time where there was really a lull in the zombie franchise, I guess. I really got an appreciation for zombie movies. I like to say I was zombie fan before zombie fandom was cool, per se. And then when Resident Evil came out, to me it was like the modern zombie movie, because there was nothing else that I could remember. You know, at this time, Resident Evil kind of reintroduced that to the mass public consciousness. Obviously, it wasn't a game changer movie. It didn't like make this whole genre like The Walking Dead did at the time, but even though they bypassed the whole mansion, the Resident Evil movie did a really good job, I thought, with the zombies and suspense. Some of the more memorable scenes in this movie I remember where I think they're escaping in a sewer from a horde of zombies, which I thought was done like amazingly. They're injured and they're tattered and they're literally just kind of hanging on top of these pipes while the zombies are just looming beneath them, and they have kind of nowhere to go, so they're just kind of hiding out there, and she's holding her bloody hand over the zombies and letting the blood drip, teasing them, you know. I thought that was a really amazing shot. It's a great zombie movie. Because I still watch this movie to this day, I still enjoy it. So that's about 15 years of liking this movie. That's why it's on my list as number 2 of my favorite video game movies. Number 1 for my favorite video game movie of all time. This may be controversial to some people. I think if you grew up in the time, you can appreciate it today. But again, I don't want to tell you what to like and what to dislike. Number 1 on my list for favorite video game movies of all time.
Are you men enough to fight with me?
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
The Street Fighter movie. Great movie. Fantastic movie. I watch this movie at least once a year. And that's kind of a guaranteed every Christmas when I hang out with a certain group of friends. We love popping this movie in. One year we did a drinking game. Every time there was one liner, you drank. Didn't make it to the end of the movie. And you want to talk about deviating from the source material. The movie Street Fighter did it in such a unique way, deviating from it, but not too far, but just enough to like punch you in the nuts with it, you know? But it created a masterpiece in itself. Let me explain to you. This movie came out in 1994. sweet, sweet summer of 1994, a different time than it is today. There was no real template to making a good video game movie, even to this day. So you had a lot of this re-envisioning these movies to fit for the silver screen to appeal to the society of the day. What they did in this movie was they just took the characters, pretty much just by name, and inspired by what they did in the game, and made a movie out of it. So this movie centered around all-American G.I. Joe, Colonel Guile, played by the Muscles from Brussels himself, my personal idol of the 90s, God's gift to women. I think he said that about himself one time. Jean-Claude Van Damme, the man who needed an excuse for pretty much every movie of why he had a French accent. He's playing Colonel Guile, the guy who has emblazoned his arm with the American flag. That, interestingly enough, that's not going to be the first, what is the word, cultural ambiguity in this movie. We will keep count. And the basic premise of this story is that he leads a ragtag group of non-sanctioned characters to take down the sadistic dictator hell-bent on world domination. Of course, I'm talking about M. Bison, as portrayed in the movie by the late, great Raul Julia. I'm not even reading the screen. This is from my heart. That's how much I love this movie.
For I beheld Satan, and he fell from heaven like lightning!
Over the years, to me, this movie has aged like a fine wine. And one of the main reasons that this movie has been so endearing to me, I watched it when it first came out in the theater, Portage Place, in the summer of 1994 with my kuya Alvin, my cousin Neil and Gary. Shout outs to you guys. We experienced this masterpiece in a theater, but there was only 3 or 4 of us in the freaking theater. Oh god, what did the score of this movie get? I gotta go see. What did Rotten Tomatoes give this movie? This movie scored an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. To me, it aged like a fine wine. And one of the main reasons for that was I really, over the years, came to appreciate this dynamic of Colonel Guile in the movie versus M. Bison, who was really, people like to say that Raul Julia's portrayal of M. Bison was so comical and over the top. That's what makes it so great. Like 2 professional wrestlers in today's era playing out some crazy rivalry culminating in one of the best boss fights I've ever seen in my life.
Are you men enough to fight with me?
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
Colonel, you can't!
Oh yes, I can.
You have made me a happy man.
Next, I'll make you a dead one.
As I said before, this movie is riddled with all these, to me, memorable one-liners my friends and I, to this day, still use in everyday conversation. Like I said, I have not seen this movie in a long time, but these are the quotes that my friends and I still say to this day. General! I have a friend who's a voice actor, so he's really good at imitating people, and he loves that one riling speech that Colonel Guile, as portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, gives his troops after, I don't know, some sort of UN people don't sanction them and they want to give in to M. Bison's demands. I'm gonna kick that son of a bitch Bison's ass so hard!
And I'm going to kick that son of a bitch Bison's ass so hard that the next Bison wannabe is gonna feel it.
I didn't say that properly. My friend Sambath says it's so good. We still say that line to this day. It riles us up. And like I said, that final boss scene, you got the flash kicks in there. Raul Julia just like, I don't know, he dies and then his suit revives him and then he gets all his psycho powers out of nowhere, which of course that's not how he gets it in the game. In the movie, it's kind of like electronic or whatever. He has like that cheesy Street Fighter board as his control panel for his hovercraft. It's so good. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. What else can I say about this movie? Basically, this movie tries to cram in every Street Fighter character that was introduced in the video game in that franchise up to this point in time. But again, this came out in a time where I guess the Street Fighter universe in the game even was not really fully fleshed out. Chun-Li, Interpol's greatest secret agent in the movie, is now a reporter, hell-bent, has a personal vendetta against M. Bison. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, kind of explaining her motivations here.
You and your gang of murderers gathered your small ounce of courage to raid across the border. for food, weapons, slave labor.
And then Raul Julia's response to that was just genius. It was amazing.
You don't remember?
For you, the day bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
He's so badass. Anyways, in her news crew, the guy working in the truck was the Japanese sumo wrestling champion. But in this movie, he's a Hawaiian?
I'm sumo, brother.
Sumo wrestler working in the truck of Chun-Li's news crew. I think that counts. And her cameraman was the in video game heel, my personal favorite character in the Street Fighter universe, turned babyface on the big screen, professional boxer Balrog.
The hostages! Where are they?
Everyone's favorite brother in arms, Ken and Ryu. They get mixed up in the whole storyline because they're a couple of smuggler hustlers, I guess, trying to sell fake guns to notorious gun lord in the movie Sagat, or as known in this movie, Victor Sagat. Yes, they gave him the name Victor, the King of Thailand, the most feared Muay Thai specialist in the video game. And they named him Victor. Of course, in the movie, Victor Sagat was portrayed by full-blooded Cherokee actor Wes Studi. Thank you, honey. But the main criticisms against this movie is that it's corny. It strays far from the source material. It has some really bad one-liner dialogue. What else can you say? List the reasons why you think this movie is bad in the comments below. I'll wait. And to say you don't like this movie for those reasons is to say like you don't like Batman 66 with Adam West. You know? The way I look at the Street Fighter movie, it's a different universe. It's a different take on something that I love, which is the Street Fighter franchise, kind of reimagined for a different medium. Batman 66 came out obviously in 1966 and was just campy and corny, kind of on purpose. And it created something unique and its own, right? And I think that I would argue that the Street Fighter movie does the same thing. I can appreciate the Street Fighter movie for what it is. It was a fun time. I still have a great time watching it. I have a fun time with friends watching it, bringing it up in everyday conversations. So for those people who've been really harsh on the Street Fighter movie, I would say give it a chance. Don't take it that seriously. Life is not that serious. Top 3 Tuesday is not that serious. Street Fighter, watch it. There. Anyways, that's my list. Let me know your top 3 video game movies in the comments below and share it. Let me know what you think about my picks and why they're wrong. Because they're not. Because they're my picks. You guys can pick whatever you want. Anyways, thank you very much to everyone who supported Top 3 Tuesday thus far. Thank you to the people who share it. Thank you to everyone who comments, gives it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel. Every Tuesday, I'm going to be trying to do these Top 3 Tuesday lists. I put a little bit more time into this one. It's a little bit longer, but I spoke from the heart. Street Fighter the movie is a great movie. For the people who don't like the Street Fighter movie, give me a break.
Okay.